Hello, this is Semi-Intelligent, and this is going to be my second video. Uh, Still going on with the Tao Te Ching, and this will be the second lesson in it. And let me get to it here. All the world recognizes the beautiful as beautiful. Herein lies ugliness. All recognize the good as good. Herein lies evil. Therefore, being and not being produce each other. Difficulty and ease bring about each other. Long and short delimit each other. High and low rest on each other. Sound and voice harmonize each other. Front and back follow each other. Therefore the sage abides in a condition of wu-wei, W-U/W-E-I. It's defined as unattached action, and carries out wordless teaching. Here the myriad things are made, yet not separated. Therefore the sage produces without possessing, acts without expectations, and accomplishes without abiding in her accomplishments. It is precisely because she does not abide in them that they never leave her. Now, the first part here, all the world recognizes beautiful as beautiful. Herein lies ugliness. All the world recognizes good as good. Herein lies evil. This is really about how we define our world and our worldview. Um, if we take a look back at, say, World War II, for example, or even farther back than that, when tribal cultures would war with each other about resources. The resources that both needed to survive meant that each side was fighting for the good of their own tribe, and therefore the other side was evil. We see this today, and we see this today in political battles. We see this today in wars. We see this today in religious debates and battles. We see this a lot in different places in our society and our life. The real difference between good and evil quite often comes down to whoever wins the battle. Now, as I've mentioned, World War II, if we look at what the Nazi Party was proselytizing, or their ideology, it was based off of a misunderstanding of certain sciences, more specifically, a misunderstanding of evolution. Now, Darwin did in his books write that there were 5 different races of human, or 5 different species of human. And this could be eliminated in the white Anglo-Saxons, the Mongols, um, also the African Americans. Now, we know today that that's not the case. There's no real difference between the different races of humans. But back then, they believed that there were major differences in the races. And a lot of what Hitler was talking about, especially when he dealt with the final solution, was this idea that allowing lesser races to exist meant that there would be an inevitable interbreeding of the races. And if you allow a weaker race to interbreed with a stronger race, you diminish humanity as a whole. Now, if this were true, then the Nazis were fighting on the good side, and we weren't. We know now, though, through scientific discovery, um, things like the Human Genome Project, that this is patently false. That there is no real difference between a black man and a white man, or a Anglo-Saxon and a Mongol. There isn't any differences. But again, with the Tao Te Ching, we have defined, or we defined at that time, that we were on the good side, they were not. Now, we also define what is beautiful. And when you define something as beautiful, you also define what is ugly, because it stands as not beautiful. It's not the physical appearance that we have deemed beautiful. And this goes through everything that it mentions in that second paragraph, too. That, let's see, being and non-being produce each other. I guess a good way of describing that is we've defined what our reality is, and by defining our reality, we've also defined things that aren't real. Now, if you look at Christianity, for example, a lot of the Christians, especially if you're a young earth creationist, um, they define that the fossil record, or evolution in general, is not real. But they've defined that the story in the Bible, the creation mythology through Genesis, is real. So that is the being, and evolution is the not being. Flip the coin over, where you're looking from a atheist or a non creation Christian worldview, and then we can say that evolution is real, or is the being, whereas the creation story is the not being. Difficulty and ease bring each other about. That's just simple. Um, Things that I find easy, in a way, the ease at which I'm able to do them help me define the difficulty that I have in certain other things. Um, I guess a good example is I'm a very sarcastic person, so I find sarcasm relatively easy. But something like my English composition, grammar, punctuation, spelling, I'm not so good at those things. So obviously, if you see some of my comments or have read some of my Facebook posts, you'll definitely understand that. Long and short delimit each other. How do we know a long distance if we don't define a short distance? How do we know a short distance if we don't define a long distance? Um, we know both of these concepts, or rather both of these words or ideas, because they stand in opposition of the other idea, word, or concept. Um, Same thing with high or low. Sound and voice, I'm not sure is quite uh, that. There's not quite that opposing dichotomy there. So I'm not exactly sure how that one fits in. Front and back, same thing with high and low, distance, and etc. Now, what it talks about here when it says, therefore the sage abides in a condition of unattached action. What this means, I've always taken a sage to be someone who has a vast storehouse of knowledge. And when it speaks of unattached action, what that is to say is the sage teaches without a predetermined goal. Um, the best way I can describe this is a difference between educating someone and indoctrinating someone. This was one of the big debates the uh, with the evolution versus creation in science class issues. And what that is to say is that evolution is backed up by tons of evidence in science. Creation is backed up primarily by the Bible. Or, to be more specific, it's the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. Three religious ideologies, or the books of three religious ideologies. And the problem with teaching creation as a legitimate scientific theory in science class is you're indoctrinating, or you run very close to indoctrinating students into the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And this is something that we in America try to avoid, specifically because of the Constitution. There's an amendment in the Constitution which says Congress shall pass no law regarding the establishment of a religion or the free practice of a religion. Now, when you're talking about public schools, if you have a public school, which the teachers there at a public school are paid uh, through taxpayer funding. More specifically, the taxes go to the government. The government funds the education system, which in turn funds the teachers, or pays the teachers. So, by having a science teacher teach a theory that's based in a religion, this is a subtle way of the government indoctrinating students into a specific religion. Now, a similar argument can be made with evolution, that it's teaching atheism or naturalistic view. The difference here, or the main difference, is with creation myths like Genesis in the Bible, Torah and Quran, um, the ancient Greek myths and Roman myths, um, or any, like the Egyptian myths, the Hindu beliefs, the Native American beliefs. These are all, well, myths or beliefs. They're kind of an interchangeable term in my mind. Um, if we teach just the creation and just evolution, we ignore all these other religions. And by doing so, we are indoctrinating into one specific religion. Whereas with atheism, well, with the religious beliefs, the evidence doesn't really mesh well with science, because in large portions the evidence doesn't match what's in the creation myths, and the creation myths don't really make any predictions. Whereas evolution, um, there's a lot of evidence with the fossil record, with DNA, with actually with breeding, like breeding new breeds of dogs, new breeds of cattle, new breeds of horses, plants. A lot of evidence there that evolution works. The second thing is that we can make valid predictions based off of evolution, in that if the environment changes, we'll see certain members of a particular species dying, whereas other members survive. And if we look at the difference between the two members within the same species, we'll see different traits in the two. Um, but that's kind of getting off topic there. What we really need to do, and what the Tao Te Ching speaks of, is instead of teaching with a purpose, like if we were to have the science teachers teaching creation, that's teaching a specific worldview or basing our knowledge on a specific worldview. We need to teach with no attachments, um, no ideologies. We just need to teach the facts. And through the facts that we teach, allow the people we teach to come onto the knowledge on their own, to make the decision on their own as to how the world works. And let's see. Acts without expectation. This is kind of a similar thing. The teacher should just lay the information out. We should teach people that we know not a specific ideology, but just teach them the facts. And then let them come to the decisions or come to the ideas on their own. And accomplishes without abiding in her accomplishments. Now, this is a little more difficult of a concept. It's essentially saying that when we teach something or when we do something, we need to do it and not expect whether or not be affected off of whether what we do fails or whether it succeeds. We need to separate ourselves from that. And this is kind of an important thing to do because one of the hardest things I've done in my life is some forms of public speaking. More specifically, when I was going to Concord College, they did require that you take a public speaking class. And more specifically, this class required you to not just write your speech, but stand up in front of the class and give your speech. And I'm not a very outgoing person. I am kind of shy. So standing up in front of a room full of people is one of the things that kind of makes me nervous. And part of the reason that I'm nervous, of course, is that I'm worried that I'm going to stand up there and I'm going to make an utter fool of myself. Because I have that attachment, because I have the concern of whether I'll make a fool of myself or not, it's going to hinder my ability to give speeches. I also draw comics, and I haven't really done much with it, even though I've had several of my friends tell me that I should try to get these published. But my fear of failure, my attachment to these comics, on whether they'll be received well or not, does limit me, and it has been probably one of the reasons that I haven't been able to do that. So it is something that if you can actually remove yourself or not attach yourself to what you're doing, it's going to make it easier for you to do said things. It is precisely because she does not abide in them that they never leave her. Now, what this is talking about is if we form an idea or if we form a movement, and if we form an idea, a movement, comics, whatever, and we focus all of that on us. I am the reason this succeeded. I should have all the glory for doing this. When we're no longer there, we're no longer a part of it, we can diminish the actions or diminish that ideology or that concept, those comics, etc. If we don't, if we just do the work and let it stand on its own, it will speak for itself. It will stand on its own regardless of what happens to us or regardless of what goes on with us. We can somewhat see this in pop culture, in certain movies, sports teams, and things like that, where you have one superstar. This is the hope of the team, or this is the big star of the show. So that the show or the sports team becomes focused around this one individual. Um, they can't attach. They can't act without attaching it to themselves. And then when something happens to that one individual, the show's gone or the sports team's going to fail for a while. Um, so it is better for us to act without attaching ourselves to something. And this will allow that, by doing so, it'll more allow the things that we produce to continue on regardless of us, whether we're there or not to support them. So that's what I took from the second lesson of the Tao Te Ching. Once again, if you take something different from it, please leave me a comment. Like and share if you think I'm doing a good job here. And once again, marry me.